This is RV on Business.
Welcome back to the 101.9 High FM. It is now 10 minutes past 10. With me is Michael Kransdorff, the CEO of the Institute for International Tax and Finance. Please go along to his website. It's very, very simple. It's intltax.org. Everything's there, how to get a hold of them, how to reach them. And please just go and book an appointment, because after this interview, that's the first thing you should be doing. Mike, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Avi, for having me on the show.
Great. Right, let's get you out of your frozen state in Joburg and let's get into it. Let's go back to the very beginning. Please outline for us, what is the process of making Aliyah, emigrating to Israel from a tax point of view?
Great, Avi. So I think people often focus on the advantage that Israel gives for people that make Aliyah, and they are significant, and they've increased actually in the last year. But people forget that they still within the South African tax framework. So until you actually formally leave the South African tax net, none of the benefits that Israel it provides actually accrue to you. So it's very important that to understand that you currently, if you're living in South Africa, you currently tax resident in South Africa, which means you taxed on your worldwide income, and when you pass away, your worldwide assets fall into your South African estate. And the first real step once you make Aliyah is to apply to SARS formally to cease to be South African tax resident. There are lots of names for this process, a lot of jargon. It's called financial immigration, sometimes tax immigration, sometimes. But it really is an application to SARS where you say, look, I'm no longer a tax resident in South Africa. I'm now living in Israel. That's my real home. I'm considered tax resident in Israel. And therefore, your taxing rights as South Africa changed dramatically. So no longer are you able to tax me on my worldwide income, but now you can only tax me on my South African source income. And that's important. People sometimes forget that. They think they financially immigrate, they cease to be South African tax resident, and they have no more South African tax obligations. That's one of the first myths. That's not entirely true. If you earn South African source income, South Africa still has taxing rights to that income. So it's important, to understand when South Africa has taxing rights and when it doesn't, and when Israel has taxing rights and when it doesn't. We can get into what South African source income means, because it's quite a technical term and it's not often what people think. But that's generally the principle, that you're dealing with two jurisdictions. You're dealing with South Africa and you're dealing with Israel, and you need to make sure who has taxing rights for each. And generally, as a rule, Israel has very favorable tax treatment for New Olim, and so you want to be in the Israeli tax net. You want to be subject to Israeli tax because that's where all the benefits come about, and you want to be out of the South African tax net. So that's generally the principle of how to structure it for most people.
Mike, I just want to get clear. The difference between financial immigration and non-tax resident. Is there a technical difference between the two?
It's a great question. And this is probably one of the most confusing aspects, or the most misunderstood aspects. So before 2021, there used to be something called financial immigration, which was a process that was around exchange control. It was with the Reserve Bank, with a SARB. Through your bank, you would fill in a form and you'd request that you formally financially immigrated. Your assets would be put into a blocked account. Now, that was actually done away with in 2021, and the tax and exchange control process was merged into one. So today, when we talk about financial immigration, it's exactly the same thing as ceasing to be South African tax resident. Those two processes have been merged. So there's no longer a process to financially immigrate with the Reserve Bank. Now you have to do it through SARS and make the case to them that in terms of the tax rules, you are no longer tax resident in South Africa.
Okay, let's jump across the pond, or go up across the desert, so to speak. We're now in Israel. Israel makes this beautiful offer to people arriving. What is it and how does it work from a tax point of view?
So Israel actually at the moment has two really amazing tax incentives. So they have historically always had, or for many years, had what's called the 10-year tax holiday. This also sometimes is misunderstood, but basically what this means is that people that make aliyah are entitled to 10 years tax-free, but not on all of their income, only on their passive foreign income. So it's income that they earn outside of Israel, things like rental income, dividends, interest, capital gains on a share portfolio. Those are the kinds of income that for a long time have been not subject to tax in Israel for your first 10 years under this sort of famous 10-year tax holiday. People often get confused because active income, what we call active income, wasn't included in the original. That was not covered by the 10-year tax holiday, and people often misunderstood that. But from this, go ahead, Avi.
Sorry, continue.
So that was the historical situation, and one other benefit of the original 10-year tax holiday was that not only did you not have to pay tax on your foreign passive income, but actually there was no disclosure obligation. So you didn't even have to report those foreign assets and those foreign income in your Israeli tax return when you submitted it. And this allowed people to get up to a whole lot of shenanigans because, determining what's passive and etc. was sort of outside of the purview of the Israeli tax authority. That changed. So from the 1st of January of this year, anybody that makes aliyah after that date, they're still entitled to the 10-year tax holiday. They don't pay tax on their foreign passive income, but they do have to disclose it. So foreign assets and foreign income is now disclosable to the Israeli tax authority, and they will therefore scrutinize to make sure that some of these schemes that people had to try and convert active income into passive income are now sort of being watched. So it's still an amazing opportunity to be able to earn capital gains and passive income tax free for 10 years, but there is now the disclosure requirement. But the good news is that in addition to the passive 10-year tax holiday, Israel recognized that, with the war and what's going on, to attract high income earning people to Israel, they're going to institute a new tax incentive for this year only. So it's if you make aliyah this year, and you can basically get a tax incentive on active income. And it's quite big. It's over sort of a 4-5 year period. But basically, there are different limits, but you can earn a significant amount of active income now tax-free as well, in addition to the 10-year passive income tax incentive. And that's really the big change, is this new incentive, which is encouraging high employee earners or business owners to come to Israel, set up there, and actually earn this active income incentive now for 5 years.
Mark, I'm going to try to squeeze a question in before Craig waved a piece of paper at us. But let's take a quick break, and after that, let's discuss this unbelievable opportunity. We'll be back with you in a moment.
This is RV on Business.
Welcome back to 101.9 Chai FM. Sorry, I'm a few seconds late. I was actually messaging people that I know who are making aliyah to be in touch with Michael Kransdorff from the Institute for International Tax and Finance. Mike, coming back to you. Thank you. What an amazing opportunity. Just unpack that active income for this year over 4 or 5 years. How does that breakdown work?
Great. So if you make aliyah, if you made aliyah after the 5th of November last year, until the end of this year, so the 31st of December 2026. So if you formally make aliyah between those dates, and you become Israeli tax resident, basically this year, being 2026, you can earn up to 600,000 shekels tax-free as a salary or active income. So that's over 3 million rand this year. then in 27 and 28, you can earn 1 million shekels each year, which is, 5.5 million rand. If you earn a salary or a consulting fees or business income, that's really a lot of money. I mean, if you think about from a South African perspective, the tax, on 5 million, 5 million rand, that's probably, 2 million rand, 2 million rand at least. Yeah, that you're getting tax free, which is, for 2 years, which is incredible. 2029, it comes down to 350,000 shekels, and then the last year it tails off to 2030 to 150,000 shekels. But it really gives you a great opportunity to start in Israel. And what's really interesting about this incentive is and this is maybe where there's a bit of a misnomer, is that the key is that you have to work physically from Israel. You physically need to be in Israel, but your employer doesn't. So it doesn't only apply to Israeli employers. You can make Aliyah, work remotely for a South African employer, doing the work physically from Israel, and still qualify for this incentive, which is absolutely huge. And if you do things right on the South African side, the PAYE that was previously withheld on your salary actually shouldn't be withheld. And so you can actually effectively earn a salary, a very decent salary, tax-free from a South African employer or a South African company in Israel for 5 years, or a portion of that tax-free for 5 years.
So, Mark, just to clarify, it's income earned in Israel. So you need to be sitting in Israel, and it needs to be from a foreign company, or it can be Israeli company also. So you can get employed by, I don't know, Bank Leumi, and they don't need to deduct tax for you. 600,000 shekel this year, 1 million shekel next year, etc., etc.
Exactly. So you can be employed by an Israeli company, so Bank Leumi. You could be employed by an American company. A lot of Olim go to Israel and find jobs working remotely for American companies. That would also apply. So you wouldn't be paying the tax. Or you continue to work for your South African employer. So that's so it's really very broad and very generous. I mean, it's quite an unbelievable opportunity. I don't think they're maybe Dubai, but besides for the UAE, it's very rare that you find countries, 10 years on passive income and now sort of 5 years on significant amount of active income. It's a really, really huge incentive. You don't see this in many places.
Mark, let me frame it for our listeners. The whole concept of Aliyah is that we as Jews have the right of return to our ancestral homeland. The government has always understood that, so many of those people would be coming home from places where they were oppressed, and therefore would be arriving with very little, and did everything to help Olim. Thank God, as the years have gone by, Jews become more and more affluent, and making Aliyah now is a very Zionistic decision to make for the most part. The challenge of this active income and having to pay tax on it has become more and more relevant since Corona, simply because the ability to work abroad electronically via the way we're doing this interview now has become the norm. So all of a sudden, Israeli tax practitioners have really had to relearn how this all works, because it was very unusual for a person to make Aliyah and then work in a foreign country. This idea of American hours is relatively a new concept. So, Mike, if you came here and you wanted to chat to my friends or play tennis or go for a run or a ride, everybody's available till about 2:30, 3 o'clock. And then they turn into pumpkins because they go online, and when you see them at a wedding, you realize the guy actually put in for leave because it's working hours. I'll get call from in our shul, in our synagogue, they did a poll as to when they wanted the evening prayer as the secondary one, and 10 p.m. was the time. People are classically mad. I come in bed at 10 p.m. And then I realized it's lunchtime or not even break for most of the people in the community. So you've got this reality, but I'm sitting here with the one side of me burning in frustration because I've been here for 6 years and I would have loved to have this incentive. On the other hand, I am aglow with pride for our Ministry of Finance and for our government, and just the forward thinking that this is the land for Jews. This is the land for you to come home. And we'll do whatever we can to make it real and palpable and acceptable to you. As I said, the Jews coming from North African countries and impoverished countries, that was the modus of the early years. We now got people coming from America, for example. I was just there a few weeks ago and spoke to friends of mine who've made Aliyah, went to their homes where they live in America, and you look at them and you say, wow, you've really had to change your lifestyle. You've really had to want to be in Israel to leave, as the term goes, golden galut, the flesh pots of the West. And now to have this incentive is incredible. Again, I often say to people, don't try to fool these radio tax authorities. The same Jewish brain that's trying to fool them is the same Jewish brain that's trying to catch you. So the two of you, it's a zero-sum game. But they've done their long-term calculations, and they've obviously worked out that in order to attract these people, this is what they need to do. Before I go on to the next thing, Mike, my message to everybody listening, to everybody transmitting this message, is please do not play broken telephone and think that you heard something and transmit it. The website is INTLTAX, internationaltax.org, or just look up Michael Kransdorff with double F at the end, the Institute for International Tax and Finance, and get a consultation and do it correctly from someone who's been through it. And I can speak on behalf of all my friends, especially the South Africans. Make sure you have the right people in your corner. Pay the money because it's worth it, and your life will be simple. The Israelis are really nice until you break the law, and then they are going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. And there's nothing worse than knowing that guillotine is coming down simply because you haven't done things correctly and you don't know where to go. So in Israel, speak to your friends, find the right accountant. Let me give you one barometer. If you still have to put everything in an envelope and mail it to Tel Aviv once a month for your accountant to go through your slips, you are in the dark ages. If you can't take a photo of your petrol slip, of the stationery that you bought, and it's automatically on your financials with your accountant, leave and go to someone who knows what they're doing. And if in South Africa, if you get a or a R or I'm not sure, let me check, and you can hear them going into chat, run away and go to the people that know what they're doing. Right, Mark, coming back to you, I need to ask you a question. We have met before, haven't we?
Yes, we met in Israel actually.
Multiple times. Okay.
At the Memorial Forest.
You are one of those humble characters that hide behind the JNF logo and sort of are invisible with what's going on. I saw the name, I thought, I know this guy. I saw the face, I said, I definitely know this guy. So you're not just one of those guys who, talk the talk. You actually walk the walk. You hear in Israel many, many times and often in a year. And so you really have a feeling of what's going on the ground. When it comes to the South African side, I found that SARS and the SARB have been very mature and very honest. They do things straight down the line. If you present them with the correct documentations in the correct way, you're not going to have a problem. Am I right there in general?
So I think there have been some problems on the South African side as well. So I think ceasing to be South African tax resident requires, determination of it's a legal question of when you actually cease to be South African tax resident. For most people, it's quite simple. It's the date that they left to make Aliyah. They shipped their goods across. They moved their lives across. Their kids are at school in Israel. So for most people, it's quite an obvious date, and we submit, the required supporting documents, and they approve it. But for other people, some people live what I call hybrid lives. There are sort of a small category of people who keep their life in South Africa going and also have a new life in Israel. And that's actually much more challenging, is to determine, where are they actually tax resident. They may keep their house in South Africa. They may buy a house in Israel. They may spend 6 months in Israel, 5 months in South Africa, or the vice versa. Sometimes you have a wife in Israel and a husband in South Africa. And so, we do have some of these quite complicated cases. And interestingly, SARS has become more and more in the last 6 months focused on these complex cases and really sort of digging in there to find it, because obviously they don't want you to leave the tax net. I often joke with people, it's a bit like Pharaoh and the children of Israel, and the 10 plagues. So that their incentive is to keep you in the tax net and not to let you go. And so, so they have actually in the last 6 months, it wasn't so true previously, but there are sort of, there's a lot more scrutiny as to what is your actual date of ceasing to be tax resident, it's quite technical, but how you cease to be tax resident, there can be multiple paths to achieving that. And so they've got a little bit stickier on that route. But for most people, if you really are packing up and moving your life over to Israel, generally the date is when your Aliyah flight is generally the date that you cease to be tax resident. We need some supporting documents to back that up. But generally, SARS has been quite good at recognizing, that and actually issuing the correct disclosure to so that they're no longer in the tax net. Where things get a little bit more tricky is the exchange control side of things. So South Africa still has exchange control, and they have quite a lot of the rules in terms of exchange control for residents and non-residents are quite different. And one of the big differences is that residents get the 2 million, now it's 2 million SDA, single discretionary allowance, which allows you to take, you and your spouse, to take 2 million rand every year out of South Africa, really no questions asked. But when you become non-resident, that SDA actually falls away. And many people don't realize that. And the nature of income that you're trying to get out of the country, or the nature of the funds, the source of funds that you're trying to get out of the country, determines what tax clearance you need. And they've made the rules around that very complicated. And often dealing with the banks as a non-resident can be challenging, and you need someone to help navigate that. South Africa often do stupid things that shoot themselves in the foot, and that's really around it. Often it's ignorance at the exchange control departments or the non-resident departments of the banks. It's complicated, and the dividends are treated different to interest, and salaries treated different to directors' fees, and so these things are complicated. And their first thing is to say no, you need a tax clearance. But once you push back, you get it through. But it can be frustrating until you get into a pattern, and into a system with the bank, and using the right banks can make a big difference. So that is one of the challenges, is for people that live hybrid lives and continue to operate in South Africa economically, the exchange control aspect in the beginning can be a bit frustrating.
So Mark, I'm smiling and I'm nodding at you because I've been through all that. First of all, yes. You submit your documents to SARS, it comes back with a no. But then the SLA, the timeline changes because you've now objected. So from 30 days it goes to 60 working days, and everything just slows down and everybody's frustrated. So again, the right practitioner, someone who knows, and you can no longer walk into SARS and knock on the door and say, hey, Please, can you help? So that's the one thing. The other thing is, what is the term that SARS uses in the Act? The place where you rest your hat, or the place you put your hat, something else, the place where you come home to from your wanderings.
Return
That's
from
the
your
one.
wanderings. Yes, yes.
Correct. So, take myself, for example, I'm in South Africa, on a regular basis. My business is there, and I had to show things like my lease. Okay, well, I don't need to live there. My wife could live there. A gym membership. I had to get a letter from my shul, from my synagogue, to prove that I lived there. And my accountant really went into the sort of the minutiae to try to show that, like, he even asked me, like, can't you buy something on HP that is very personal, a bicycle, or something that, not a kitchen appliance, just to show that you actually live there. And a lot of us come to Israel and we sort of try to allow it to become a little bit more modest, because the rand's not what it is in South Africa, and also we want to change pace. We wanted to get a different quality of life, so to speak. So the advice I give to people is, number one, every time you travel, in your passport, have a little piece of paper and write down the date you left, that is stamped, and all the stamps, because they're there. But to go look for them is a mission. If you've got them down, and then you can put them onto a little spreadsheet, it will make your life easier. Just get letters from people that show that you live there, from your rabbi, from whoever it is, from your personal trainer, because that's what SARS wants to see. Are you living there? And the traveling up and down is another thing. But we're going to go to the break. But when we come back, I just want to touch on that sort of scare that came out recently about South Africans coming back and making declarations. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with you in a moment.
This is RV on Business.
Welcome back to 101.9 Chai FM. Mark, coming back to you, there's been a lot on social media. There's been a lot going on. I personally haven't looked into it because I'm only coming back in the next couple of weeks. Do I need to do something before I go through customs in South Africa again?
Yeah, so South Africa's instituted a new online sort of customs declaration form, and sort of got people quite worked up. I don't know if you remember, in the old days when you used to fly, there was that paper form on the plane that you used to fill out before you used to land in places, and you'd have to declare, sort of whether you're bringing cash in or bottles of whiskey,
the biggest worry
electronics.
wasn't whether the plane was going to crash, or whether the biggest worry is whether you had a pen or not.
Exactly.
Stupid form, yes.
So they did away with that. It was, I guess it gave you something to do in the last few hours of the flight. But they did away with that a couple of years ago, but they've now brought it back in a digital form. And SARS has got this online declaration where, if you're entering the country 24 hours before you enter the country, you need to complete this form. And 24 hours before you leave the country, you need to complete this form. It does ask you some questions, if you're going, where you're going to, what you're going to be doing, or if you're coming, what you're doing here. And asks you to, you have to set, in most cases, people just tick, I've got nothing to declare. Obviously, if you do have stuff to declare, electronics that you're bringing in or stuff that's subject to duties, you need to tick that. And then when you go through customs, they'll pull you aside and you'll pay the customs that you owe. But it will give SARS a lot more information in addition to the customs information, but they'll have a lot more information on your movements in and out of the country. So up to now, those movements were sort of kept by the Home Affairs. Actually had a list of your ins and outs into the country. And to be honest, the sharing of information between Home Affairs and SARS doesn't seem to have been great. But now SARS will have their own way of tracking your movements in and out of the country. And if you spend excessive amounts of time in South Africa, if you non-resident, they may sort of see that as a red flag and send you an email to say, we see you spending a lot of time in South Africa. We may consider you now to be tax resident in South Africa again. So, so I think it does give them a lot more information, and they will be able to track specifically the time that you spend in and out of the country.
But yet, once again, if everything is above board, you've followed process, and you've got the right person in your corner, this is not a reason to have a panic. It's simply a reason to declare. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. Just when you listen to social media and you see people coming on, number one, often the information is not crisp. You don't know what you're dealing with, and number two, often it's slightly embellished to just for the wow factor. Mike, I'm going to change tack a little bit. What I'd like the listeners to know is just what is, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about your company, about your background. Again, I've met you at some really heart-wrenching events representing South Africa, and you've just got a very humble way about you. But yet, if you look at your bio on your website, you've really got academic qualifications from some of the elite universities in the world. You run a company that deals with some very challenging topics. Just tell us who this mystery man is and what this business is all about.
Thanks, Avi. So the Institute of International Tax and Finance focuses, or Intel Tax, we call it, focuses on people that immigration is a big issue, people that leave South Africa living abroad and need help to sort of structure their South African affairs, get out of the South African tax net. Also, a big part of our business is helping people externalize their retirement savings once they leave South Africa. So that's a big issue for people. They leave their retirement annuities, their pensions in South Africa. Now they're living abroad, and they need to sort of externalize these. Where do they pay tax in their new country in South Africa? How does that work? So it's actually quite a complicated area, and we specialize in that as well. So that's a big chunk of the work that we do. But also we deal with people in South Africa that may have offshore assets or offshore structures that need sort of advice. Often people set up structures years ago, and they work for the tax rules that were set up years ago, but they didn't take into account that their children moved to another jurisdiction or that the tax rules changed. And a lot of these structures become obsolete or need to be changed and relooked at, especially where you have family members that are moving abroad, which happens so often now in our community. So, the trust structure might be great for South Africa, but it's a disaster for Israel or terror, or shocking for the UK. So you need to think about those things. So we often deal with those aspects. People come to us. Often, unfortunately, people come to us with problems, So I wish people would come to us before they immigrate, or, just even for one session, just to get advice to say how to set things up. Maybe there isn't very much to do, but just some of the pitfalls to avoid. But often people only come to us later when there's an issue and they need access to their money and their funds. And that often it's much more costly to fix problems than to preemptively avoid them.
Absolutely. Prevention is always better than cure, as we say. And Mark, I think the one thing that you didn't say as a gentleman is that often the people who put those structures up are no longer with us or are very much out of the loop as to what's happening. So if you went to a one-man show and this chap's now in Golden Acres or whatever it is, you're not having an affair by going behind this person's back. You've got to keep up and current. If you're dealing with a large company and there's fresh information and blood coming in all the time, that's fine. But let's take a quick break and then we'll finish off in a moment.
This is RV on Business.
Welcome back to 101.9 High FM. In studio with me online is Michael Kransdorff, who is the CEO of the Institute for International Tax and Finance. I just want to thank you. What we've done in 50 minutes here, hours of telephoned consultation, sitting in Beyachad, wasn't able to achieve. It's so nice to be able to make a recommendation and to give advice where I'm not allowed to, usually because of the laws. Here, my advice is please consult with the experts and go to the people who know South African tax and know Israeli tax and who travel between the two countries regularly and have their fingers on the pulse. I have no doubt that some people are hesitant because there is a cost for consultation. And as I learned from a very wise senior businessman in South Africa, everybody is entitled to make a living. I agree with that. But I can tell you something now from me, which is maybe just a more humble saying, that you pay for the advice that you're going to get. And if you don't get the right advice, it is going to cost you not only in money, it is going to cost you an anxiety and anguish. This Israeli tax authorities are on top of the game. But please remember that when you come to Israel, as a taxpayer, as a citizen, as a resident, you get so much from the government. Besides those who risk their lives as police and soldiers and security personnel, you get an infrastructure. You get cities that work and operate. You get so much to enjoy. You take my city, Modi'in, for example. Summer here is a long time for kids, 2 months. Every single day there's a free event put on for children and a free event for adults put on. Whether you're religious or you're not so religious, you can pick and choose. But there's something for everyone. Someone has to pay for that. As citizens, we get so much, and we are so grateful for the way in which it's done and in the passion in which our ministers do their jobs, whether we agree or don't agree politically, that's not the issue. So don't have that anxiety that you are not doing the right thing, because by playing your part, you add value to everyone coming in. And Mike, I would just like to say very briefly to all the Christian Zionists that make Aliyah possible for so many thousands of Jews all over the world. This is an unknown fact, and I don't think they want it publicized in lights. But so many Christians love Israel, love Jews, and put their money where their mouths are, and they make sure that these Aliyah flights can happen, number one. And number two, when so many of us, and here I'm referring to Jews, are scared to come to Israel, our Christians, brothers and sisters, run into the fire. Come, they support, they help, they volunteer. And the next time we as Jews are maybe judgmental, we should just know that there are millions of Christians around the world who have got our back. And to you, I literally get on my knees and open my heart and say thank you, because I now know what you do. And it was an honor to speak to you in Cape Town on a weekend a few weeks ago. Mike, I think that's quite a good way to end off. What do you say?
Yeah, brilliant. I think, this is a great opportunity for people to make Aliyah. I think it's one of the most forward-looking and forward-thinking Israeli proposals. And we really should give credit to the Minister of Aliyah, of Sofer, for pushing this through. And people should take advantage. This is a really big opportunity. This is the year to make Aliyah.
Great. Mike, thank you so much. Internationaltax.org. Go look it up. Thank you so much. And we'll be in touch. All the best.